for me, but that's just because I've been spoiled by the beautiful weather and the beautiful country of Malawi.
So, just a few weeks ago, we've seen that your country has called for urgent economic reforms if Malawi is to stay on course, especially with the IMF, particularly the Extended Credit Facility Program. Can you tell us what specific economic reforms is the US government urging Malawi to implement so that the country stays on course?
Sure, and I think it's important that we explain what an extended credit facility was meant to do. It was meant to give guarantees so that Malawi could access credit and access funding from the World Bank to stabilize the economy. And the agreement with the International Monetary Fund was something that Malawi sought out. This was something the government of Malawi wanted. Of course, we were cheerleaders for it on the U.S. side and so many other missions here in Malawi because we really know it can deliver what needs to happen on the macroeconomic side. So we use tough words like macroeconomic side, but what I would say is that the average Malawi knows that they can only spend the money they have in their purse or their wallet, right? But the government has been spending more than 10% in deficit year on and year out. And so for the second year, Malawi has the highest deficit across Africa. And what we're trying to do is get Malawi to grow the economy, and part of that starts with reducing expenditures. So our concern about why Malawi isn't on track is it hasn't reduced expenditures and it hasn't raised revenue. These are investments, right? These are investments made to help stabilize the economy and then grow the economy. And what we want to do is make sure that companies can come and jobs can flourish, and without a stable economic environment, that's not going to happen.
So the relationship between Malawi and the United States dates to 1960.
Yes.
And here you are acknowledging that Malawi is one of the countries with the highest deficit in Africa. As the United States, what are you doing to help your partner?
Well, we're doing a lot, but I think the question we need to ask is, what is Malawi doing? We have given $2 billion alone in the last 5 years to Malawi. Your current GDP imports $4 billion a year. So if we've given $2 billion in 5 years, and that's what you spend in imports in a year, you have to look at where your other money is coming from. And it can't just come from donors, or what I like to call strategic investors, right? We invest in Malawi not because we're looking for an economic return. We're looking for a return on human capital. So what we want to see is better educated Malawians, healthier Malawians. We want to see a more responsive government. And that's what our investment is designed to do.
What investment deals are you proposing?
Well, it's not just investment deals. And when we invest strategically in schools, I think you know that we've built 89 schools across the country. We invest in healthcare. Most of the healthcare infrastructure is provided either through the Global Fund, which we support 40% of, or it's through PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. We also invest in agriculture. We're happy to partner with Pyxis and Gala to grow groundnuts. 10 years ago, Malawi only exported 10%, or about 10 million worth of groundnuts, $10 million annually in groundnuts. This year, 10 years later, due to the investments that we've made and the Irish government has made, it's 100 million. That's a tremendous economic success. So what we want to do is make sure that the government is also doing its part. And its part means it can't spend too much money. And its part means it has to raise revenue. And it has to raise revenue not just by collecting from the 10 same companies in Malawi, but really looking at the informal market. And I think Malawians, can see that there's a lot of money coming in on the informal market. Flights are booked every day. They're packed. There's a lot of transactions going on. People are borrowing Forex on the parallel market, and there's a lot of activity, but that activity isn't being taxed. And that's what needs to happen.
So looking at these investments, reforms that you have mentioned, how do you measure the success?
So let's look at our investments in the health sector. When PEPFAR started in Malawi in 2008, we were combating the AIDS epidemic, and Malawi had suffered tremendous losses. It was one of the highest in Africa. And at that time, the average life expectancy was about 42 years of age. Today, it's 63. Now, those are investments we made not just in providing antivirals, but investments we made in training doctors and nurses and funding laboratories and clinics and maximizing health resources across Malawi. Today, 1 million Malawians receive antivirals. That's the investment we made. It's 1 million people who are alive today because of this investment. It's a tremendous success story. And we've done that with the Ministry of Health. We haven't done it alone. We've done it with other partners. But we've had really firm guidelines about how the money was going to be spent to best maximize life expectancy and health outcomes for Malawians. And that's what we want to see with all of our investments. And that's what every strategic investor wants to see.
Do you think what you're doing is enough to bail out Malawi?
No, of course not, because no one country can bail out Malawi. Malawi has to figure its path out. What we can do is offer options and advice and funding, which we've been doing for 60 years. But at a certain point, this is Malawians' responsibility. And I do think Malawians want to do it. Every Malawian wants a job. They don't want to just be handed the resource. They want a real job. They want to earn their place in this world. And when I talk to youth across the country, whether in universities or grade schools, they talk about wanting a job. They want to contribute. So when I look at our investments are about expanding opportunity. But the government has to do its part by reducing expenditures and raising revenues.
Madam Diaz, your government recently announced that several Malawian individuals have been banned from entering the United States. What criteria was used to come up with this decision?
You know, these were Malawians who had significant evidence of corruption. You know, there was significant information presented to the courts, and the cases stalled for a number of years. And we picked these 4 individuals and their families, I might add, because they owed a duty of care to Malawians. These were people who were either prosecutors or police commissioners or in government roles that should have been looking out for Malawians' interests. And we made this decision after watching these court cases go no further.
You've admitted that the matter is in court. Don't you think you're interfering with matters of the judiciary?
You know, it's funny because when I travel across Malawi, whether it's religious leaders or youth or people in education, even some people in the government ask me why we can't do more. So I don't think we're interfering. I think what we're addressing is the fact that Malawians want accountability and justice, and why I don't think this provides perfect justice. I think it's some small measure of accountability. And I do want to do that because this is money that's been misused and it's been taken out of Malawians. And this is the reason why less children get to go to school, or people can't afford medicine, or maybe don't have homes that they can fit all of their families in. This is money that matters. And if we don't hold these individuals accountable, who's going to?
From where you stand, do you think it is right to interfere in matters that are currently in court?
I don't think we're interfering. I think what we've seen is a stalled process. And when you don't have courts functioning properly, where these cases should have gone forward to an outcome, then I think, yes, we have to hold actors responsible. And again, this isn't a legal judgment. This is a decision not to let them travel to my country or their families to travel to my country. That's the only ramification of this decision, and I think that's well within our sovereignty.
In an event that the court finds these individuals not guilty, what will your government do?
They'll still stay on our list because we do believe there's credible evidence. And our laws have always included a provision that actors who are involved in corruption or criminal practices cannot be admitted into the United States. And it does not require a criminal conviction because that's the right of immigration. And the Ministry of Immigration also refuses visitors every year who apply or who want to come in to Malawi because they suspect that there's illegal wrongdoing. So what we've done is exercise our sovereign right to say, you can't come to America. But we've announced it publicly because we do think accountability needs to happen.
Are you not undermining Malawi's national independence?
How? I mean, this is a decision about who enters the United States on travel. There's nothing about Malawi's sovereignty. Malawi has the right to continue to prosecute these cases or not, just as the U.S. has the right to decide who enters our country.
The U.S. is going to the polls this November.
Mm-hmm.
What should Malawi expect in as far as diplomatic relations is concerned?
Well, we have a long tradition of our foreign policy being nonpartisan. And so I think we're watching a very competitive election in the United States. I'm certainly watching the polls closely and watching the news coverage. But I don't think you're going to see a huge change in our relationship. But we are facing new funding constraints, and I think that is coming no matter who's president in the next term. You know, in a world where global challenges like Sudan and Gaza and Israel and Ukraine continue, you know, the U.S. is going to have to help a lot of countries with humanitarian assistance. And so I think that's really so important that we get things right with our strategic investments in Malawi because we have less funding. And it's not just us, it's other international donors as well, because we're having to help in so many countries. And as global climate change continues, I think we'll continue to see more pressure on our resources. And that's why I think it's so important and why I've been speaking out about things like the ECF and the economy, because we need Malawi to get it right, because the funding will have to go to other places.
Come November, should we expect policy shift?
I don't know, because I don't know who's going to win the election, but I don't think you'll see a major policy shift in terms of our commitments here. You know, this is a priority country for education and food and health, and that will continue no matter who's elected president in November.
How does the U.S. assess the upcoming elections in Malawi?
I think it's too early. I mean, we haven't had even all the political conventions yet. The registration process hasn't started. I think it's really early, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to seeing the registration process start, and we're hoping that we'll have a really good registration process. But I think our eyes are on our election right now, and then we'll turn our eyes to Malawi's election.
In case you're just tuning in, this is MBC Exclusive with me, Alinafe Mlamba. My guest today is the U.S. Chief of Mission, Amy Diaz. We'll be back after this short break. Welcome back. This is MBC Exclusive with me, Alinafe Mlamba. My guest today is the USA Chief of Mission to Malawi, Amy Diaz. Are there areas of mutual interest in which the United States sees it fit that Malawi need to up its game? Areas that need to be prioritized differently?
Well, the economy. I mean, I think that's a big area of concern for us. We need to create more jobs. You have a youth bulge coming. The estimate, I think, is in 10 years, 80% of Malawi's population will be under the age of 35. They're going to need jobs and homes and education. And so looking at how we increase innovation, how we drive jobs here, how we create more wealth for this new generation to partake in is really important. And then I think our other really big area of concern is climate change.
If you look at Malawi's electoral process, is there an area that the United States sees it fit that the government of Malawi should prioritize?
Well, a good registration process is critical. And as I said, because we haven't watched that process start, we're hopeful. We have a lot of faith in the Malawi Electoral Commission. But we just have to see the access for Malawians to be able to register and to vote in the upcoming election. But again, I think it's early, and I think we have to see how this registration process turns out, how the political parties meet and how they nominate. And then, of course, our biggest concern in any election in any of the world is a free and fair electoral playing field. So that means that all candidates have a chance to have public rallies, and that they have a chance to have equal news coverage, and that they have a chance to meet and travel across Malawi freely. And so as long as those things are upheld, I think we'll have a good election. But those are usually what we focus on in an election.
Now, the U.S. government provides over $350 million per year in Malawi in form of bilateral assistance, of course, that targets health, agriculture, education, among other sectors. Can you elaborate on the key areas where the U.S. is currently providing solutions to Malawi?
Well, we actually provide more than that. I would think about this year, we were estimating we'd provide around $400 million. I think it's closer to $450 million because of additional food support and relief that we provided to Cyclone Freddy and the money that's still coming in. Additionally, we're the largest shareholder in the IMF and the World Bank, so that funding that also has come in as part of what U.S. taxpayers pay into. The Global Fund, I mentioned that earlier, that's what pays for 90% of antivirals in country. We're 40% funders of that fund worldwide. So it's probably closer to $700 million that we actually provide altogether. I make that point because we're strategic investors. And so, again, we want to see the government continue the hard work of reforming the economy so that the investments can be paid forward. So we have a strategic investment in education. We have a strategic investment in health because we need well-educated Malawians, we need healthy Malawians, and then we have a strategic investment in agriculture and in growing the business environment.
If we're to look at Malawi's current economic outlook, should we expect a change in strategies and focus?
Well, I think we're going to expect more accountability for funding. I think that our concerns with if the government doesn't succeed in getting the second tranche of an ECF is that it loses eligibility for World Bank funding, it loses eligibility for on-budget assistance from the EU, it loses some of the eligibility for funding from the African Development Bank, but more importantly, it sends a signal to investors that the macroeconomic environment here is too difficult. And if companies can't get out their profits, they're not going to come and invest. And so the ECF for us is the signal that we want to send to investors that Malawi is serious about creating jobs and welcoming investments. And that's how you create wealth. And if you look at what's happened in Zambia in the last 4 years, there's been tremendous economic growth, and that's been driven by private investment. And that's what we hope for Malawi. That's what we want to see in Malawi. So we continue to encourage the government to go forward on mining. I was really happy to see mining development agreements signed, but more needs to be done. And we really have to think about how we continue to attract businesses here and how we help businesses operate here.
You've mentioned job creation, wealth creation as some of the things that can help Malawi. But then recently we've also seen President Dr. Lazarus Chakwera emphasizing on the need for job and wealth creation, not to mention his ATM strategy. How are you assisting him so that these things are achieved?
Well, in our agriculture, we've made significant investments. Groundnuts, let me use that as an example. 10 years ago, Malawi exported 10 million in groundnuts annually. 10 years after significant investments into groundnuts here, particularly in collaboration with Pyxis, and the Irish government is also an investor, last year exports for groundnuts reached 100 million. We had the first groundnut tour ever outside the state of Georgia, my home country, which is the largest producer of groundnuts. This year we supported that groundnut tour, and our goal is to make Malawi maybe third or fourth in the world in terms of groundnut exporters. And that can happen, but it's only going to happen if we have a business enabling environment where businesses can come and they can see their profits and be able to get out their profits. You're probably aware about 30% of any forex that a company earns in Malawi is kept in the bank, and they can't access that. And then Malawi has a 40% tax on most corporations. So what companies tell me is 70% of their profits are tied up. And that's a really difficult enabling environment. And what we're unfortunately seeing is businesses make the choice to go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, or to go to Zambia or Zimbabwe or Mozambique because it's an easier environment to operate in. And
speaking of exports, you gave Malawi a chance to be exporting goods to your country through the African Growth Opportunity Act. Since its inception, we've seen that Malawi has been sending most raw materials to the United States, and with Malawi pushing to be a more exporting nation, do you think we can do better?
Sure, and I think the secret to maximizing AGOA benefits is producing finished goods. So if you're only exporting raw goods, raw agricultural products, you're not seeing the full benefit of AGOA. And so one of the things when you asked about what are we doing here, we are partnering with Gala, and they are growing macadamia nuts. And one of our investments is now to be able to package and process the macadamia nuts in country. Not only does that provide more jobs, but if it's packaged in Malawi, it can actually export more successfully to the United States and maximize the AGOA Act. So our investments now are looking at how do we provide more finished goods for Malawi in the agricultural sector so they can export more and actually get more needed forex.
What can Malawi do to fully utilize this window?
They need to let businesses work and do the work they're meant to do. And I think that means predictability with the tax structure. Too often when I hear from businesses that they've paid the amount that they've been assessed and then MRA comes back and asks for more. or that they have an agreement with the government about how things will be taxed and the government changes the tax code. You know, businesses like human beings need predictability to plan. And if you can't operationally plan your budget, then it's very difficult to succeed as a business. And it's the same for families. You know, families need to know how much money they're going to have every month. And if MRA came to them and said, you have 50% less money this month, they can't make it either. So we can't expect businesses to do the work they're meant to do here, which is create jobs and grow wealth, if they don't have an enabling environment where they can take profits and reinvest it, or they can import without additional taxation, or they can just know that, you know, after they've paid a 40% tax, MRA isn't going to come back to them and say, actually, you need to pay more additional taxes on this item.
Let's talk about this withhold release. We noticed that you eased the ban in 2021 on tobacco imports from Premium Tobacco Malawi Limited, among other countries. Is there any update on the U.S. policy regarding the ban on tobacco from Malawi?
Sure. So, you know, in 2021, I believe, we put the ban in place because we saw that there was widespread child labor involved in the harvesting of tobacco. And one of our fundamental foreign policy guides is human rights. And of course, you know, child labor is something that we're very concerned about worldwide. And this is a policy we have worldwide where we will not allow the importation of any sector into the United States if it involves child labor. So every year we have experts that come. They visited again last year. And a lot of progress is being made in terms of making sure that children aren't used in the production of tobacco here. And I'm hopeful that in the next year or so, we will probably see that restriction removed. But that really depends on the experts that come to Malawi every year, widely travel Malawi, and see how tobacco is harvested.
We have seen many Malawians going to the U.S., some for studies, some they choose to settle there. What are you doing to ensure that their stay is legal and, of course, they feel free like U.S. residents?
Well, you know, every Malawian who comes to the United States has to receive a visa. And the majority of Malawians who come to study, and we love having Malawian students. And we're really excited to bring their talents and their unique knowledge and their viewpoint to American universities, because we want all American students to benefit from different viewpoints. And so I think that's a really important priority for us. In terms of legal status, you know, people get interviewed for visas. We look at their ties, we look at what would bring them back to Malawi, and we look at their purpose. And so we find that most students, if they choose to seek job opportunities in the United States after finishing college in Malawi, have a legal path to do so. And so that really isn't a problem. Where we see more overstays is when people say they're going for a business reason, or maybe they say they're going to school and they don't end up going to school. And so we do look at that, and we do have immigration, and we do deport people who have violated our immigration laws, but we try really hard not to have that happen. We try really hard at the interview process to determine that there is a good plan for your study or your visit to the United States, and that if you are going to end up working in the United States, that there's a legal path for you to do so.
There is political tension in Malawi. We've seen a lot of wrangles as of late. What message do you have for Malawi?
Well, you know, we have a lot of political tensions in the United States as well. And so, you know, honestly, I feel like I've learned a lot from watching Malawians talk about unity and how important that is. And, you know, freedom and unity. It's not just one. It's not just to be unified, but to be free as well. And it's a lesson I take back to my own country, because sometimes we focus too much on our differences rather than what we have in common. Here in Malawi, you know, I'm hopeful that given how difficult the economic environment is, that political parties aren't going to fight. They need to do the work that serves Malawians better. And that would be my message back. And, you know, the message I take back to the United States is the same. We need to do the work that serves the American people better and our international partners better. So, you know, I don't have advice so much as respect for the principle of unity, and hope that political parties will say, look, Malawi's in a really difficult time and we can't fight amongst each other. We need to fight for Malawi. And that's what I hope they take away.
The principle of unity is what the USA Chief of Mission, Ami Diaz, is saying. My name is Alina Femlamba, and this was MBC exclusive. Until next time, goodbye.